Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Sweeney, and I'm the Marketing Director of AdTech MarTech at Qinshift. And in today's video, I'm joined by my colleagues, Radosław Kostecki, who is Director of Business Development of AdTech MarTech, and Greg Łukaszewicz, who is Head of Discipline, Business Analysis and Consultancy of AdTech MarTech. And the topic we'll be discussing today is replacing third-party AdTech and MarTech platforms with custom-built solutions. So Radek, we'll start with you. So just spend a few minutes telling us what it means exactly when we say, replacing third-party platforms and tools with custom-built solutions. What does that mean exactly?
Thanks for having me, Mike. So in general, the trend that is we've noticed in the market as Clearcoat, as we are the builders of advertising marketing technology, is that many companies, they use some third-party solution, white label third-party providers. Indeed, there are like certain types of white label providers, depending on the type of advertising channel, depending on the type of traffic that needs to be handled. But in general, the trend we've noticed at Clearcoat is that more and more companies are looking more and more towards replacement, the third-party tools. And these are not only the typical AdTech vendors that want to have their proprietary tech, but also companies outside, or the ones that are, let's say, ambitious to become also an advertising technology company, like, retail, media, telecommunication companies. So these companies have the potential to, and then enough scale to get rid of the third party. So this is like the trend that we are talking about. So Clearcoat helps with the actual replacement, and this is something we would like to give you some more heads up and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Cool. So let's kind of talk about maybe the reason why companies would decide to replace their existing tools, the ones that they use, as you said, whether it's a white label solution or, some kind of existing ad tech platform. What's the underlying problem that is, I guess, causing companies to get in contact with us and explore the option of replacing existing third-party tools with custom-built ones?
There are certain two reasons why are business oriented. Maybe about the business oriented, I'll talk a few words. So in general, each provider of white label, they charge you a fee, or either on monthly basis or yearly basis, depending on the type of traffic they need to process. And there's certain costs that you need to take into account apart from just your ad spend. There is always a margin which can be quite significant, especially if the scale is quite enormous. So this is one of the main business reasons. On the technology reason, maybe Greg, you want to add something here?
Yeah, I think that the ownership of the tech is very important for the clients nowadays, because the influence of what is in the application, in the services that they use on the daily basis, and it's quite important because the environment changes very quickly, and be able to adapt to new realities rapidly is pretty important for the client. So I guess that would be one more reason to switch into a custom build instead of relying on some third-party developers that you don't really have an influence on, and the roadmap that is also very vague usually when it comes to some third-party solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the short term, in terms of the short-term approach, if the traffic is not big enough, oftentimes someone chooses the white label. If we are talking about smaller engagement, beginning of the journey inside AdTech, but many of them are curious, but still many companies are not even aware that replacement it's not something that takes so much time to at least on the MVP level to have something in place. So
it's a good starting point, right? Yeah. For the companies to start with something ready to roll out the production, start earning some money, and then you are basically in the decision, either you grow and you will eventually need something custom built because of the amount of the traffic that you are handling, or we want to be very specific in your business, right? So you try to aim for resolving some singular problem, for example, or aim for some specific branch of this business. And for that, you need a very specific features that usually are not provided in some SaaS solutions that try to hit as wide audience as possible, right?
Exactly. Cool. All right. So, Radek, you kind of touched on this a second ago, but what types of companies are facing this problem, right? Because obviously you mentioned a second ago, like the key benefits of building custom solutions to replace existing third-party ones. A lot of those revolve around cost savings. Greg mentioned ownership of the technology, control of the product roadmap, etc. So what types of companies are generally facing this problem?
So maybe I would maybe set the two main groups, because one are the ones that already have an existing quite complex ecosystem. They have a lot of already existing third-party blocks. They like correlate with each other, but oftentimes the costs that get generated from each third party creates a quite big number, significant one. And our customers, we look at their own ecosystem, what they actually have, especially the big enterprise level companies, and we are trying to look together which is the piece that actually is the most problematic, cost-wise, IP-wise, functionality-wise, and we decide for replacement. So this is, let's say, the first part. The second group are the companies that have at least like one main business, so they can either have the DSP already in place, for example, a DSP or a supply-side platform, but they feel that this is the momentum they need to think in the long term to replace this particular technology. So they don't need to necessarily have multiple third parties, but at least even the one that they base their business on. So those are rather smaller organizations, but quite well established already. So they managed to establish the business at least on the level that they generate revenue, right? So they are ready for replacements. It's how to actually approach it, and we help to do it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah. Just a quick follow-up question with that, because I guess like a lot of the companies that we have worked with, in recent years to help build custom solutions to replace their existing tools, I guess a lot of these ones would already kind of be operating in the programmatic advertising industry, right? Whether it's large-scale publishers, media companies, large advertising agencies, etc. Now that we're seeing the rise of things like retail media, CTV, all these kind of new emerging channels where there's huge potential for scale, huge potential to create thriving advertising businesses, some companies have taken the custom built path where they've kind of gone out and built some of these advertising platforms themselves, for example. But a lot of companies, especially retailers, CTV, OTT companies, etc., are starting off using existing tools, right? Whether it's, example like Netflix, for example, when they launched their advertising business, they used Microsoft's advertising platform. So do you kind of see this trend continuing with new channels like retail media, CTV, where companies start off using existing tools? Because as Grzegorz said as well, that's the easiest way to get into it. And then after maybe a few years, once they've scaled up that side of the business, then look to go down the custom solution path because of the reasons we mentioned before. Do you kind of see that trend continuing into things like retail media and CTV?
The trend is still already in place. Obviously, the new companies, which are outside of our like typical AdTech vendors, they also had to educate the market. They are a little new. They're like a new player in the ecosystem. So also the point that is tempting for using third party oftentimes is the actual integrations. So the third party can be already integrated with multiple other systems. So in their case, when also the awareness or which path is the right one for them to take business-wise, third party can help them from time to time to set the right direction, right? But whenever they dive a little deeper and they build more awareness and they see the limitations that the third party has, then oftentimes they can consider the custom build. Obviously, in ClearCode's offering, our experiences helps us to help the companies, right? To know and navigate which is the right way to take based on our experiences, right?
I think that it's a very reasonable business decision, right? Because if you are introducing a new channel in your well-established business, like for example Netflix you mentioned, right? What you want to do is you want to very quickly see how potentially profitable the new channel is, right? And the easiest way to set it up is to use the third-party services, right? So that's a very reasonable business decision to, hey, let's make it happen as soon as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to work. Let's see what's the potential. Once the potential is there, then usually they try to move to something custom made.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, when you talk with different, even very well-known brands, marketing agencies, but also AdTech vendors and companies outside of the ecosystem, in fact, they are not necessarily even aware that, on the other hand, custom build not necessarily means years of development in order to have anything, right? Like the MVP, the MVP around 6 months, right? 4, 6, 8 months. This is still doable. It's just a matter to narrow the exact functionality and what's needed for your particular case, for your particular situation, and to start generating revenue. So this is actually surprising that many companies, they are not even aware. Obviously, it requires a good partner. Like, of course, Pirkle is, right?
I mean, yeah, you're right here, but I guess that it's harder. It's easier for them to leave out something that didn't work out business-wise, that was just used annually or monthly, than invest in some technology, right? Because usually you need to do something with this technology. Even if you don't, if this channel didn't work for you, for your business, you still have some piece of code, some piece of services that going to waste. And I think that's why they tend to go in the route of ready software or SaaS solutions to rely on them. But at the end, I guess that the flexibility, and in the example that you mentioned, when some ecosystems are stitched from like multiple different third-party services, and it's like glued and taped to work, to just kind of check if this would be reasonable business approach. After that, you need to have some cleaning done there, right? And I guess that the big scary thing for those companies, especially if the ecosystem is larger, is okay. So we have something working right now, right? So if we would build something from scratch, there will be bugs, there will be issues, there will be maybe something will not work. We won't have every feature that we use every day. Those kind of questions arise when you're thinking about moving to something more made for you, for your business, made for your use case, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, like, kind of touching on what you said there as well, Greg, is that, if a company starts using some existing tool, like piece of software, ad platform, whatever, and then after a few years, they would have a pretty good idea of how those advertising processes work for them, right? And I guess then when it comes to building some kind of custom solution, they're going to have a lot clearer idea of what they actually want to do, what features they want to build, what their requirements are. And I guess that can also help with, building something that is really tailored around their business, rather than kind of using an existing piece of software that they then kind of have to, tailor to match their business, rather than the other way around, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what is happening. And in addition, even they don't really need to know all the details. So we can, for example, approach the use case more broadly, not only help with the technology, but help with, okay, so you did a couple of things in your use case, like what worked, what didn't work, what earned you money, what has no potential for you, and we can, based on that, try to advise where to go from there, right? And along with that, we can plan out the technology. So it's all very optimized for the client. And that's once we will build this kind of plan, it's very clear for the clients that, hey, that was a very good decision, right? Because we save some money on the fees on the third-party software. We have a probably lighter stack to manage and to sustain for the future. And it covers multiple angles that were very much profitable for us, for example, right? And we left out whatever we didn't need or we didn't use.
Excellent. All right, so I'll stay with you, Greg, for this next question. So we've kind of, we've talked about the problem, we've talked about the types of companies that this, I guess, topic applies to. But from ClearCode's side of things, like what solutions do we propose? How do we approach the process of replacing existing third-party platforms with custom-built solutions for our clients?
That, of course, depends on the client and the specific use case, because every client is different. And we always approach each client individually. But there are some ground rules, right? And for example, for one of the clients that we had lately, we have a very similar use case. So they have an advertising setup based on third-party DSP, third-party SSP. They have the full ecosystem, and Radek mentioned actually the very big benefit of that is that you have already some pre-existing integrations with different DSPs, for example, right? To get more abilities of an ad display on your inventory. So how to approach changing a pretty big system like that is we decided to create a separate bidder that would kind of hook up to this ecosystem and start bidding from the sources that are not available in this third-party DSP. So the first step was kind of not messing around with what's already existing, just add a block to it, right? And add some more integrations. So we kind of expand on what was already existing. And from that point, it's pretty straightforward, because whatever, you can check, for example, in your DSP, in your SSP, which DSP's integrations are the most profitable, what are the ones that you want to work with from different reasons. And we can try to integrate those. So you don't have to, integrate 100 different DSPs in order to get some good deals on the impressions. You need to have the ones that are working for you, and that was the approach that we've taken. So we build the bidder, we hook it up in the existing ecosystem, and start to replacing each part one by one. So the process was seamless, and it's not like a revolution; it's an evolution, right? So we kind of evolved the current setup that the client was relying on to not jeopardize their income that they have established already, and to make sure that in the worst case scenario, our addition to the ecosystem will not work as expected, but it won't break the existing setup, right? So it's very safe approach. And then it's, once you are hooked up, it's way easier to expand and extend this solution further, because it's already working on production. You can work in smaller stages to kind of move on, and this doesn't have to happen in like rapidly from end of the year and on January 1st we need to have a new solution. That's usually not the case. But having said that, there are of course cases where companies, we also have one of our clients that they pay a huge amount of fees on the third-party systems that they want to cut off from the costs, and that was a very strict deadline, right? So the approach here would be a little bit different. So we, in this use case, we decided to cut a little bit on the functionalities. So we focused on the ones that are very, very important and crucial for the client. and build a very lightweight system that could work and still generate revenue that we can run before we need to turn off all the third-party systems, right? So we also, again, we are very safe because we are trying to start using the system way earlier, right? And you have a little bit of overlap there, but it's very safe for your business as a whole, right? So it depends on the client needs, on the specific environment, on the business structure, on the business model, but we take all of those into consideration. So at least we are at ClearCode, at Qinshift, we try to have a holistic approach to the business of our client, not only focus on the technical capabilities.
That point actually, Greg, inspired me to one thing. Also, like similarities that we've noticed here in replacing third party is that the businesses that are ready to replace for the replacement are the ones that have already a business relationship with third party, either SSPs, DSPs, whenever we obviously replace the system. So it's much easier for someone with already existing business relationship to do it. And obviously, business relationship takes place, especially if you're integrated, connected to big, like provider, I don't know, Trade Desk or whatever, the big players that require some time to establish the relationship. So for the ones that they already have the business relationship, this is a very tempting path to then think about. The other ones that require the business relationships is a little longer journey. So it's good to establish connections early before the actual, development of the system. So this is actually something that is common in different other cases we've come up so far.
Perfect. All right. Excellent. Yeah, that's all the questions I had for today. So was there anything you guys want to add, a final thought or anything before we finish up?
And just remember, the custom build is always better than the SaaS solution. It's tricky because it's cheaper, it's more flexible, it gives you an ownership, it gives you abilities that you don't really have with the ready solution. That nonetheless doesn't mean that the SaaS solutions are useless. That's not the point. The point is if you are thinking about moving to a custom build, you probably should, and we can help with that. And that doesn't mean that you need to break a bank or spend now 3 years on the development. You can always reach out and we can help out and find a solution that will fit your needs.
Yeah, happy to help.
Perfect. Good final words there. Good call to action. Excellent. So yeah, if anyone would like to learn more about the custom built solutions, replacing existing third-party AdTech, MarTech platforms, etc., get in contact with us at Qinshift.com. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn. I would recommend getting in contact with Rado. He's on LinkedIn very, very often, so he'll certainly respond to your message very quickly if you get in contact with him, even if it's just to learn more about our experience with this, kind of learn about some of the projects that we've worked on as well. Do get in contact with us if you have any questions about this topic. So yeah, Radek, Greg, thank you so much for your time today. It was really great talking to you guys, and we'll chat again next time, maybe a similar topic, maybe about something else. But yeah, thanks again for your time, and thank you everyone, and yeah, we'll speak to everyone soon.
Thanks, Mike. Looking forward.
Yeah, thank you for having us here.